Welcome, everybody, to our ESIP January 2025 meeting. We are going to go ahead and get started now. My name is Denise Hills, and I'm going to start with something that we've been doing recently is a land acknowledgement. The purpose of a land acknowledgement is to recognize that we may not be the first people to live, work, and play in a place. It is a way to show respect and to recognize the Indigenous peoples who were the original stewards of the lands where we live our lives today. But a land acknowledgement should do more than just acknowledge. It should help direct future action. As Earth and space scientists, we understand the value of connection to the land. ESIP staff and volunteer leaders live all over the US and even across the globe and have connections to countless Indigenous people. As we start our January 2025 virtual meeting, I want to honor and pay respects to those elders, past, present, and future. I see the ESIP community building those relationships with stewards of the land in collaboration areas such as data sovereignty and community resilience clusters, amongst many others. Those were just kind of the two most obvious ones to me. I challenge you throughout this week and in the coming months to consider how you are building those relationships with the stewards of the land. Specifically, I challenge all of us to look for our opportunities to engage this week. Connect with our plenary speakers who will be speaking about data-enhanced disaster response and the importance of co-production. Or perhaps one of the presentations at the Research Showcase might inspire you. Or see what happens in all of our exciting breakouts. I encourage you to look to the past for guidance, but work towards the future we want. Thank you. And so welcome again to our January 2025 ESIP virtual meeting. Thank you for spending this week with us. For those of you who may not know me, I'm Denise Hills. I'm the current board president for ESIP. And it is my pleasure to open our ESIP January 2025 meeting. We have such great things planned for you this week, from exciting plenaries to breakout sessions covering a breadth of topics, to our research showcase on Wednesday, to networking opportunities throughout the week. I want to remind everybody of our community participation guidelines. A link will be dropped in the chat for that to ensure a respectful environment. Typically, at the start of these meetings, you would be welcomed by our executive director, Susan Shingle-Decker. And you may be wondering where she is. Susan recently had her appendix out and is still recovering. As her energy levels allow, you may see her around in some sessions, probably with her camera off, just listening. Please understand her need for rest and her need to rest and recover this week, and direct any questions you may have to the ESIP staff, myself, or to other board members. ESIP's theme for 2025 is Innovation to Impact. A lot of thought goes into choosing our annual meeting theme, so I'd like to explore this a little bit with you to get us started today. Innovation and ESIP are nearly synonymous. The word comes up again and again when people talk about ESIP. In fact, it was one of the most common words used in our interactive business meeting this last July in Asheville, when we asked for your input to the most vital elements of ESIP, past, present, and future. And while we all love the new, the exciting, or some might say bright and shiny things, innovation for innovation's sake isn't enough. One of the great things about ESIP is all of the conversations and exchanges we have the privilege to be a part of. In September, at the NOAA AI meeting, there was a talk by Janie Vichy, who is the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Oceans and Atmosphere, she emphasized the importance importance of centering those most impacted by our work in our work. This really struck a chord with many of us. Centering impacted communities can be relatively clear when working with Indigenous communities, disaster impacted neighborhoods, or even defined research areas. But for some of our work, the impacts and the impacted are a little harder to see. Our work is both upstream and downstream, preventative and reactive. But I guarantee you, the innovations seated here at ESIP and realized within our 180 partner organizations have real impact for systems, for technology, for researchers, for communities, and for real change. I look forward to a year where we can center both the innovation and the impacts of those innovations. To start us off, Susan was super excited to invite an incredibly impactful organization into the ESIP community, the American Red Cross, to hear about how they use earth science data to drive innovation and impact in their operations nationwide. More on that in just a minute. Later in the week, we will hear from Kira Sullivan-Wiley from the Pew Charitable Trust to talk about co-production in our work. With that, today, though, it is my pleasure to introduce Casey Richards with the American Red Cross, speaking on data-enhanced decisions, data in the disaster response cycle. Casey oversees a team that leverages data science, geospatial analytics, and disaster assessment to provide insights and decision support products for the American Red Cross domestic disaster operations. She and her team focus on the intersection between technology and response management, incorporating automation and integrated data models into field operable products that support data-enhanced decision-making to improve service to individuals and communities affected by disaster. After beginning her Red Cross career as a volunteer, Casey has shifted into increasingly strategic roles over her 10 years within the organization. Having worked in the field, deployed to disasters ranging from wildfires to large-scale hurricane responses, she has experience at all levels of the response decision stack. She brings her public health expertise and tools to combine with an operational mindset in her role as Senior Director of Situational Awareness and Decision Support. Casey is speaking to us today from Los Angeles, where she is on the ground in response to the current wildfire situation. Casey, welcome to ESIP, and I look forward to your talk.
Thank you so much. I'm really pleased to be here with you. As Denise said, I recently landed on the ground in Los Angeles to help support some of our data needs with the response to the Los Angeles wildfires. As we look at data, it's so critical for us, as Denise said, to look at those outcomes. Every piece of data that we look at is necessary to help us reach the outcomes of helping communities and individuals affected by disaster recover and get to not necessarily back to where they were, but back to where they can move forward in their new space and their new recovery. This is, as we've moved over the past 10 years with my career in the Red Cross, and just as we look at the trends in disasters at this point in time, what we find is that we have an increase in disasters. We are seeing an increase in U.S. disasters over $1 billion or more, even adjusted for time. We're constantly seeing more and more, and 2024 is even greater than 2023. It's January, so we haven't quite gotten the updated statistics for those. But with that, we also have a decrease in time. So for the Red Cross, we're responding to a disaster approximately every 10 to 12 days. So every 10 to 12 days, every 2 weeks, we are deploying individuals and responding to a disaster, whether that's a flood, a wildfire, a hurricane, a tornado, or even some of our multifamily fires and home fires, because every disaster can start locally, and a disaster for a single family is still their disaster. As we look at this, we have to understand, how do we manage in an environment of continuous response? When you're continually responding, your resources get depleted. Your information has to move faster. You have to be able to adjudicate the resources, the material, the people. You have to be able to make decisions faster and make efficient decisions and make them as well informed as you possibly can. When we look at that continuous response, you look at sustainability, you look at fatigue, how fast you can get your information, how well it's synthesized really matters. We don't have disaster seasons anymore. We 10 years ago, we could look at having fire season, we might have a small break, we'd see tornadoes, tornado and storm season, we would see a flood season, we'd see a hurricane season, and there were lulls and breaks in there. Now it runs continuously. We see disaster after disaster compounding on top of each other, repetitive loss if we look at the combination of Helene and Milton in Florida this year. We see the secondary impacts of disaster, where it's not just a hurricane, wind, and surge event. We're also looking at a compounding water event on top of it. And so as we look at those pieces, we have to start evaluating, how do we efficiently respond? And to do that, we have to have the data to make the good decisions. When I started with the Red Cross, a lot of what we saw in responses was paper maps with highlighters, sticky notes on the walls, though I'm not sure we're ever getting rid of sticky notes. And we were just starting to think about how we would use data differently. We started the business intelligence products. The geospatial data started moving to the cloud. And so we started building maps that were integrated, that we could see online. We started looking at building business intelligence products instead of standard reports. We always have a layer that still fails on occasion. But as we started looking at that, we started becoming more dependent on the visual data that's available. You start adding in live data feeds, understanding what our partners at NOAA, National Weather Service, Hurricane Center, can provide when we're trying to understand what the impact of a community is. But when it came down to it 7 years ago, if you looked under the hood of all of these images and maps, very few of them were automated. The data we were looking at was being moved by people in the middle of the evening. It would be midnight, 2 a.m. in the morning, and there's someone moving data to make sure we could see it on a map the next day, to check the layers to make sure that a radar feed was working, to create an analytics so we knew how many people we had put in a shelter. And to sustain, as more and more disasters were occurring, less time was occurring between those disasters, we had to shift how we thought about our data. It could no longer be static. It could no longer have this shelf life. And so you have to take a step back sometimes from your analytics piece to figure out how to build the pipelines. And so we started on a journey of digital transformation to understand what data we really needed to make decisions that drove impacts. Were we counting things? Were we reporting things just to report them, or because we had always done it? Were the feeds from our partners and the data that we were ingesting, were they the right sources for us to use? Or were we just depending on what was familiar to us? Did we miss a data product because we were doing what we had always done? And so you start this digital transformation, this movement away from manually moving data, of using what you've always used to identify what the stable products are and where your successes can be. And so you start moving into live reporting. No one's up in the middle of the night. The data comes in. You know how many people have been in your shelter. You can ask questions of the data differently. We can look at how many calls we have coming in. We can understand that in Southern California, we have a higher call volume than we might somewhere else. We can see peaks. We can evaluate why. And the why of the data is critically important. Why we're seeing a peak, why we're getting calls in from an area, why our shelter population has gone up or down. Creating the narrative around that allows us to make decisions about what we have available, what we need to do, how we inform the decisions that we make. When we look at it, an operation like we have now in the Southern California wildfires, it's an environment that is, I think, best described early on as VUCA. It's volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, and it's ambiguous. Understanding the impacts that are constantly changing, that dynamic nature early in a disaster, can be the difference in having the resources that are on the ground and available, both people and supplies, and not having them there, not being able to meet the needs of a community, of the individuals affected by this disaster. And so being able to combine information from earth sciences with our response data, with our service delivery, with our statistics on people, with our supplies, with the demands from the community that we're hearing, with calls that are coming in from the community telling us that they need help. So I'm putting up our live data right now for calls, and we can see where are calls coming from. Are they coming from individuals who are inside the impacted area? Are they coming from outside of the area? What is our demand signal? And understanding that with where our impacts are, where our future risk is critical for us. But the data right now is still a manual synthesis. For us to make decisions off of our data, we have to pile on layer upon layer. We still look at our data in a siloed fashion. It's split up. We have sheltering, we have logistics, we have contact center calls. We look at the data separately. When we look at it together, it's individual layers of data. And what that means is we have to synthesize ourselves. Synthesizing on your own as an operator, as a leader in a VUCA environment, that volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment, means that you're making decisions, you're spending a lot of energy to synthesize data to make a decision. It means that an operator who's been on the ground for 2 weeks, working 18-hour days, not sleeping very much, and who isn't a data scientist, who isn't an analyst, is now in charge of synthesizing data to help enhance and drive their decisions. And so if you're looking at a situation where you're having to synthesize that information and you're sleep deprived, most likely you're going to lean more on your experience, on your gut instinct, and maybe a little less on that information that you have available. because you're having to turn it into intelligence yourself. As we look towards a future of disaster response and one of continuous response, we have to change the model of how we look at data. It can't just be data. It can't be just information. We have to start providing the intelligence products that are user-friendly for our operators in the field to quickly make decisions during a crisis. We have to provide that stable third leg of the decision-making stool that enhances and stabilizes the experience and the gut instinct of that operator on the ground. And right now, we're still in a space where it's manually synthesized. This is an area of need within the response community, particularly for our disaster response operators on the ground. There is so much information at this point in time. If we add all of the layers of information of weather, of fire, if I just look at fire data for the California wildfires, we add in just what our current incidents are, what our risks are currently. We add in information on how many calls we're getting, how much damage we have recorded. All of a sudden, what we end up with is just too much information to synthesize, and this isn't even all of it. And this may not be the right data. We have so much information, and we haven't reached a point of being able to synthesize it into single products, that it means that we can't evaluate beyond what we can synthesize from these layers upon layers of data. And so as we look towards a future of data enhanced decision making, stabilizing how we make decisions operationally for crisis situation in a world of continuous response where we'll be more tired, responding more often. How do we change this? How do we get to that synthesis? How do we bring in different data sources, maybe a better data source that is operational so that we can meet our outcomes? If analysis doesn't help us support the recovery of a community of our clients, then is that the value add we need from a piece of data? Does it enhance the intelligence to help us make a decision? It's a space where for our operators in the field to successfully make those decisions, to change the course of communities in their recovery process, of clients within their recovery process, we need to be able to consolidate. We need to be able to make those decisions fast. And our operators need to be able to trust that what's in front of them is data that creates a quality experience. And that they can trust. It's easy to fall back on instincts if the data you're presented leads you in a direction that doesn't align with what eyes on the ground may see or what their experience tells them. And so to enhance it, we really need to make sure that every piece of data and every analytic that we use does inform that decision-making process. Now, there are a couple of caveats I think are important when we look at this. And one is that in a disaster situation, we never have perfect. We'll never reach a perfect state. And sometimes perfect is so complex that we'll never reach it in time to make a successful decision. So it's also about understanding that we need to reach the 80% solution, the 90% informed solution, and allow the other legs of the stool to help with that other 10 to 20%, because we need it efficiently and in a format where it doesn't take a scientist to decipher the decision or to run a data model, or it doesn't take so much information that it takes too much time to collect for us to make a decision off of. We will never have perfect during a disaster, and it's we can only have as close to accurate as we can for the time frame that we're in. We've seen tools that have been built over time that were really great and had amazing potential, but they were so complex to run that it took our data engineers to run them. Well, that doesn't really help on the ground. It doesn't help our operators if we have to have a team of IT specialists run something in Linux on Kubernetes for us to be able to make a decision. We need to be able to simplify it. Simplify means sometimes not being perfect. It means being good enough to make the decision in the speed that we need to in a sustainable fashion. As we start organizationally dipping our toes into the space of AI in partnerships, looking at damage assessment with Microsoft's AI for Good over the past couple of years, and how we can use satellite imagery and aerial imagery to help inform preliminary impact and damage assessment, to start looking at how machine learning can impact our ability to predict where in an impacted area where are the communities that really are going to need us first? Where are the communities where we need to make sure we're in and providing support, because they are going to likely need our help first? It's not that you don't get to everyone, it's that at some point you have to prioritize. You have to prioritize because of resources, because of time, and because if you tried to be everywhere on that first day, you won't be anywhere. Finding out how you can prioritize takes time. It takes operators and their experience and providing their information. It requires good quality data, which during a disaster, depending on what data you're bringing in, can be iffy. If we're looking at operational data, disaster data doesn't always look as clean. Relying on other sources of data like earth science data and our impact data and storm data, aerial imagery, satellite imagery and analytics, computer vision, to help enhance and improve the quality that goes along with our own service delivery data, can be really helpful within that process. But integrating that requires into these models also requires that interoperability piece. How well your data plays together, how well you can connect it, how well you can build the data model, train your models to run their analysis is really critical. If you're spending all of your time trying to line up and make data interoperable, if you can't connect the pipelines, if the data isn't consistent as it comes across in those formats, then it means that you can't build that predictable product for that operator to be able to trust and make decisions off of. And so it takes a whole cycle of data collection, data products, data pipelines, developing interoperability, ensuring good governance of data, all put together to be able to analyze it and use that data to make decisions, which means that it takes time. And time isn't necessarily something we always have right now. And so one of the pieces and one of the reasons I'm very excited to be here is everyone in ESIP has a contribution to make to organizations like the Red Cross, like some of the others who will be here to speak, to the outcome-driven and social space. You have the knowledge, you have data that can contribute to these decisions and help us drive towards understanding what we're bringing in. We can communicate, we can build information, we can build pipelines, and we can build the opportunity to partner and create a synthesis of information that changes the outcomes of people affected by events such as the California wildfires. I I think I sped through a good portion of what I intended today. I admit it's been a long couple of days with our operations. Our impacts on the ground right now are how do we get to everyone we need to when we don't know where they are? When people evacuate from an event, they get dispersed. The calls you see on this map can be people calling to help others within the greater Los Angeles community, or they could be someone who's displaced and staying somewhere else. And sometimes we can't tell the difference based on the data we have. Sometimes we don't understand the full scope of the impact until we get much further out from an event. But the more that we can drive towards an understanding early of our impacts, of being able to look at data that allows us to get ready for high risk events based on what our risk areas are. Do we have timeframes or communities that will be more at risk? How do we evaluate that faster ahead of time? And then be able to apply that and the impacts that we understand to serve those communities faster. Denise, as I said, my apologies. I think I sped through everything a little faster than I intended this morning. But
that just gives us more time for questions, I think.
I prefer an interactive Q&A session anyway.
Yes.
But we're really excited. There's so much opportunity that we'd love to answer any questions.
Great. We've had some really great questions already come in on Slido. Please continue to add your questions in there. Upvote others that you see synergy with. But Casey, we are so happy to have you and the Red Cross here at ESIP. I definitely see connections that can be made, ways that if you and your colleagues at the Red Cross can get more involved in ESIP, ways that we may be able to solve some of your challenges or move you closer to that 80% solution. So I'm going to go through. This was such a great talk, and I very much appreciate you. I understand that you got in very late last night, and it is very early for you in California this morning. And this was a really excellent talk. We've got such great questions coming in. A lot of people expressing their thanks for your and the Red Cross's efforts in this. We've got a question from Dave Jones. Do you have someone focusing on identifying those trusted data sources and how that data can be used to help inform your decision making?
Sure. That actually comes a lot out of our team, the team that that I support. We are referred to as situational awareness and decision support. Unfortunately, that acronym is SADS. It was not my idea. I inherited it. But we really do go through and vet resources, talk to our partners, identify what resources are the best to leverage and use. It really takes a lot of conversation to vet a resource and make sure that we're using the one that is most applicable and most relevant to what we do. Sometimes it's not the most obvious resource that we have, but that's something that we do within our shop.
Yeah, no, we really, that sounds great. And I do see connections where ESIP can probably help you with that.
Mhm.
Uh, Another really popular question that we've had, you mentioned some of the challenges around interoperability and consistency of data.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest fails that you see in that realm? Uh, and this question is coming because this is a topic that is very near and dear to a lot of people in ESIP's heart, and they're working to help solve them, and they would love to maybe directly address some of what you've got going on.
Oh, well, there are several different pieces, and sometimes it's even internally to an organization that you can have those interoperability issues as well. Sometimes we find that some of the toughest spaces is that initial connection to the data, and then getting the data, ingesting the data, and realizing that you can't translate it across. So if you can't relate the data, you spend most of your time trying to solve that relationship when we look at the data itself. If we're not using similar formats, if there's not a way to unify from an identifier or a key standpoint to bring data across, you can't. It's really hard and sometimes nearly impossible on the timelines that we have to translate to the relevance of a current event. The other space is really sometimes that technical piece of the pipelines of the data that are available, how the data is stored, what type of server you're using or cloud-based resource. Organizationally, I will affectionately refer to our data structure as a hodgepodge. We have everything, a little bit of everything. We have Amazon Web Services, S3 buckets. We've got uh, Azure SQL servers. We have Salesforce. We have Teradata. We have Oracle. We have a little bit of everything, which means even internally, we don't always have good interoperability with our data. Now, as we look towards a future of consolidating and we move towards things like an operational data store, we can work around those pieces. But as soon as you have the complexity of bringing in partner data into those environments or sharing partner data out, you
Mhm.
can you can sometimes end up with as a situation where you just can't make the data match and connect.
Mhm. So I'm going to kind of mush together maybe a couple questions because I
Yeah.
think it falls on really well with this. Uh, you know, I assume that you're probably looking to other jurisdictions like British Columbia apparently has similar system related
Mhm.
data systems and uh, you know what other I had another one here. And it sounds like one of your challenges is that you don't necessarily have a dedicated IT team, uh, or you don't have enough human resources to be doing this work. What are ways that we can kind of help that collaboration space? And then a follow on, how do people get jobs like this? That was a question. Dear.
So I have a small data shop, but we are small and we're very operationally focused. We look at all of our disaster data and work within that space for all of our domestic, including US territory responses. Because we have so many responses, that stabilized research in the background is the place where we find our vulnerability. How do you move forward when you're constantly putting the fires out so you don't have time to fireproof? And so with my team, as far as we're structured where we have a small set of staff, and then we have volunteers who also support in our space. And so I have a geospatial analytics group that runs our geospatial data pieces, but it's very small. It's a single staff member and a set of volunteers. I have a group that focuses on situational awareness, damage assessments, data collection, that synthesis and reporting space. And then I have a team that is focused on our decision support, which is our data science, our data pipelines, data modeling, visualization and decision tools, and also our partner data sharing. And so how you end up in this kind of role, it really depends. It's we've been building our team, and a lot of my team didn't come from the Red Cross and other roles. They came to us from other areas of data analytics. There are a few of us who started as operators in the field and happen to have data.
I Is Casey frozen or am I frozen?
Casey is frozen, Denise. Hopefully she'll be back in a minute.
Oh no, I hope so because I this is such a great discussion and I'm so excited, but she's cold. Even Casey's image is frozen. Yes. um. Oh, I think maybe hopefully she'll be back. She'll be back in just a minute, but we'll make sure she gets a copy of all the questions that are going into Slido, even if we don't get a chance to ask them directly today. And she hopes to be in some sessions throughout the week as her schedule allows. She is on West Coast time, so she's hoping to be able to meet. Casey's back! Yay!
I'm not really sure what happened. I other than Zoom decided I talked too much.
And the gremlins came out. The gremlins came out.
Gremlins, it's always the gremlins.
Always the gremlins. Um, it's like I'm not sure where we got to, but one of the questions that I'm very interested in, and I think I'm going to pair these two questions. You mentioned the need for prioritization, as well as what are some other example decisions that operators are trying to make when looking at these data. So on the prioritization, there's a question about do you just look at property values or population density? What sort of trade-offs are you looking at as you're making those priority decisions, and what other sorts of decisions are operators trying to make in the moment?
That's really good. I like this question. So from a prioritization standpoint, what we're really looking at is getting into communities, particularly that have heavy levels of impact, but are less likely to be receiving other services. We want to get to the communities that aren't going to have as much. So if we're not necessarily looking at the highest property value, we're probably looking at the lower property value, the communities that are likely to have higher damage and less resources to support their recovery effort. We want to be able to prioritize those who are going to need a hot meal, who are going to need help with being able to clean up and get back into their home. Those who maybe don't have insurance or are underinsured and will need other support structures, may not be eligible for other services that some can apply for. This is really about being able to ensure not just equality, but really equity in what we're doing. And so prioritizing those communities who need us the most is critical for us.
I absolutely love hearing that personally. And so what other types of decisions are your operators trying to make in the moment?
Absolutely. So some of the decisions are ahead of an event. So we have no notice and we have notice events. So hurricanes would be a notice event. We know where our risk areas are. We know generally where the direction of a storm. We put together scenarios to help us plan, understand potential impact, and then we move supplies and people nearby, but in most likely safe locations. And we have to understand where those areas are, where we need to put things. Not putting a shelter in a flood zone, making sure that if we have shelters on that have encroaching wildfire risk, making those decisions to move a shelter, to move the population of our workforce, to ensure that the individuals that we have on the ground serving those affected also don't become affected. The other types of decisions we make is what type of service does a community need? Is it that maybe there wasn't enough damage within a residential community to create an impact that caused a displacement in the sense of their home can't be lived in until major repairs happen, but they don't have power, the infrastructure is down, all the food in their refrigerator is now untenable. Their water sources are not reliable at this point in time. They can stay in their home if they have access to clean it up, if they have the supplies they need or the tools they need to clean it up. And so being able to provide what's needed, it has to do a lot with impact data and understanding the needs of community and combining the demand signal that we get from call center and our community leaders who talk to us about what the needs are in combination with the impact data.
Mhm. Yeah. So this was interesting to me for sure, because I would love to poke around at some of this. Those dashboards that you showed, are they publicly available or are they only internally available?
These are currently internally available. They are live operational tools. It's aggregate data. We do have some of it that works through. We have a partner portal where our working partners can see a lot of this information as well. But because it's live data, it also means it can be a little on the messy side as well. Which means that we're making decisions off of it every day. Sometimes we have a reporting that might be off. And so this is really for us to operationally be able to see and make decisions on an enterprise level.
Great. That is something I think many people at ESIP are very familiar with, and probably have experience that may be able to assist in getting closer to that 80% solution that you're talking about. Um, this is an interesting question. Does the Red Cross partner with other relief organizations to help avoid duplication in any of effort, either in response or in data analysis or in other ways.
Yeah, we do partner to prevent duplication. Particularly, there are a lot of fantastic feeding partners in the disaster space at this point in time, and being able to coordinate across those partners or even provide support so that we're supporting their mission to feed. It may be that they're producing meals, we may deliver those meals for them. We may help support in other ways just to, and this allows us to ensure we're not putting all the food in one community, that we're able to spread out, that we can evaluate where those pieces are. And it's really critical to do that, to ensure that we all know what we're doing within this space, because it allows us to force multiply. And as we have to respond to more and more disasters, we're going to need that force multiplication to really support. From a data analytics standpoint, I don't think, I think there are a lot of innovators in the space looking at the same data from sometimes very similar lenses and sometimes really divergent lenses. And so I think at this point, we're not really at a point of deduplicating efforts, because the analysis that everyone's doing has a slightly different lens, and there may be a reason for the subtle differences within it. At some point, coming together and saying, hey, a bunch of organizations have worked on AI-driven preliminary damage assessment where we can see damage through satellite imagery. Maybe we should all look at these models and see where the commonalities and variations are and why. And start looking at that collaborative space, because it drives consistency and information. But as I said, there may be reasons why you wouldn't. Some may be focused on residential damage structures, such as the Red Cross. Others may be more interested in roads and infrastructure. And so when you're looking at that variation, there are good reasons for it. It's where the commonalities and overlaps are, where you may be able to enhance because someone's doing something really great in their data model that could inform yours.
Mhm. And so, kind of a little bit of a somewhat of a follow on to that is related to data sourcing. It's really it can be really hard to access and use data unless you understand how it was collected, how it was processed, how it's stored, how it's served. It gets a little bit to the interoperability and fit for purpose.
Yes,
That kind of that provenance, that lineage is really, really critical. And I
it
think
is.
that, you know, it- this is one of those things that ESIP is trying to do really well. And I think that they are. And so we do really encourage you and your colleagues to participate in ESIP and help us learn and understand how we can better help. And I think, it's like when we're talking about different organizations using the same data, um, kind of that crosstalk of understanding for fitness of purpose,
Yeah.
uh, and how you're making your decisions, I think is really, really critical. Um,
I fully agree with that. It's, when we look at data and our we my shop ends up engaged in the whole basically data process, from data collection and helping the different programs within our disaster response look at how they collect data, how they evaluate it. Then we work with then we work through the process of how we process it, from collection to processing to any ETLs to the data modeling, and we do that so that we're fully versed in the language of the data that we have, because that allows us to also communicate if we go into sharing with someone the data that we have. It means that we can communicate any vulnerabilities that we have within that data, and we can go ahead and acknowledge the sometimes artisanal data sets that come out of disaster response. And from working with partners, sometimes a single data set is leveraged and used for multiple different reasons by multiple different partners through different lenses. And understanding where the commonalities are and where the variations and the quirks may be in those data sources can be incredibly helpful and really inform how we can best leverage data to inform our decision-making process.
Yeah, so we have one of our collaboration areas is all about information quality, and how to document and assess information quality. And so I think that you have a deep understanding of the importance of that, and I think that would be a great place for you or some of your team to get more engaged with ESIP. Uh, what is your wish list? For the main data products that you're doing, uh, how can we help? It's like, what's your wish list? Do you have direct contacts with your data products to provide that feedback for what you wish for automation? Are there ways that, we can help you establish those contacts?
Oh, we do have some contacts with through some of our partners. We don't have all of them. We're often at this space because I would say over the past 3 years, both our data sharing and our data partnership has begun to grow substantially. But that means we're also building those foundational relationships right now, connecting in and understanding our pathway to data sources, and also others who may need a pathway to our data that may help inform some of the research that they're doing as well. And so we're really starting to step into that space. We're not 100% there, I'll definitely say. And so those are connections that we look at from the wish list standpoint. On our point, we are really looking for the ability to quickly assess the impact to a community, enrich that with understanding the vulnerabilities within the different communities where their needs may be varied. A community that has a significant aging population is going to may have different needs than a community that is has a high disability quotient, different from a community that may have language barriers. While they'll all have a standard disaster need, there are other needs that they may have that don't fit the same mold. And how do we understand that as well? And how do we make sure that what we're providing is appropriate for the community that we're providing it to? So our wish list is really, how do we enrich information and impact
Mhm,
about a disaster
mhm.
with the needs of that community?
Yeah. Um, That's wonderful. So we have a lot of folks involved in ESIP who are trying to help with workforce development and looking at training the next generation of scientists and data scientists. So we think a lot about data management education. Do you find that your staff kind of working on data are familiar with things like the FAIR data principles, the findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable? Or are they coming out of school somewhat naive about kind of leading practices on data management?
I think it's a mixed bag. I find that my more experienced data management team has a lot of those principles in place, is really comfortable with leveraging them. Some of our newer, less exposed group has more of the flyover view of it. And not necessarily, and it takes some time just to ingrain the discipline and practice of it. I think I think one of the key pieces is the discipline. It's, you can train the theory, but the practice and discipline is what really drives that success within that data management space.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Nothing like actually, you know, using it yourself to understand why sometimes why certain things can be really, really important to do. Uh, so there's one of our questions is states that they have been tracking watch duty with great interest and see them doing some really useful work related to wildfires. Is the American Red Cross working with them? And any thoughts about watch duty?
Watch Duty is doing some really interesting things. We don't currently, I believe they do access some of our open source shelter data. We don't have as far as from my team's standpoint, we don't have a direct connection with them. I am also paying attention and looking at some of the interesting things that they're doing from a wildfire standpoint. The organizations who are driven towards this very purpose-built area of information and data within a subset of disaster is a really creative way to leverage data and to be able to support information and dissemination. As I said, we haven't been in that sort of engagement and contact, but a lot of our operators do leverage the tool because they are working in a space that is different than what we do. And recreating wheels internally that someone else is doing well doesn't always make sense.
Yeah. Speaking of, I imagine that you are familiar with some of the government websites or tools such as EJ Screen and the the CEGJST, which is Climate and Energy Justice Screening Tool, which tries to incorporate some of the demographic information at least. But again, I'm sure they run into similar challenges as you do at the Red Cross with things being the trade-off between static and dynamic and live action. But
Yes.
I'm sure that you're
Yes,
familiar with a lot of those similar things and incorporate those into your workflows.
Mhm. And understanding the balance within it, using any static analytic tool that gives an aggregate scoring or evaluation of a geographic community.
Yeah.
It has limitations in its representation, but the consistency in decision-making product is sometimes the better way to lean towards getting that percentage of decision-making process. And then the rest comes from that mixed methods. So we can pull all the data together that we want, but sometimes the best information that we get is having a conversation on the ground with people within an impacted community. And that's how you develop that balance. And that's also how you make up that 80%, or from that 80% to that next is that mixed methodology of it.
I absolutely love that you brought in working directly with the communities impacted, because that is definitely a theme that we're going to be seeing throughout the week. It's like one of our speakers later this week is going to be talking about co-production.
It's
And I think that,
necessary. You can't.
yes, and I think
Yeah.
that just shows the great connection between the work that you're doing right now and what we'll be learning about later this week. Um, we do have some more time, but I also understand that we're going to be moving into a break after this. But so I wanted to give you an opportunity if you had any, because I believe we've gone through all the questions in Slido. I did not see any more questions in Slido, and I think I asked all of mine as well.
Denise,
But
we had one more from Dave pop up in Slido.
oh, did we? Oh, there we go. Thank you. Thank you, Erin. How are your efforts accepted by your work in the community pre-disaster?
So we do work within communities pre-disaster. We have a few different we have regional offices and local offices with across the nation. We do preparedness programs, readiness programs, training volunteers to respond to local disasters. The other space that we look at is deliberate planning, working with our partners to intentionally plan for the hazards within those communities and how, as a community, we can be prepared. The other space that we work in is what's referred to as our is a community adaptation program, which identifies hyperkinetic local partners to help support to help bolster what they're doing in their communities on a day-to-day basis in a way that will help enhance the safety nets within those communities post-disaster. So we focus on health, hunger, and housing as the three main components of this. And so in areas with high food insecurity, in high risk response areas, going in and working with those local food pantries, the soup kitchens, the spaces where there's the opportunity to enhance and make them more resilient in the face of disaster, to continue to support or to come back online faster and maybe even accept more clients in post-event is one of the critical ways that we're now working with our communities to support.
I saw a question pop up in chat that is somewhat related, I believe. Obviously, unhoused populations pose particular challenge. Folks who are already displaced, unhoused before a disaster. Do you have techniques for working with such populations?
We specifically partner with our continuum of care, local agencies that support homeless shelters and transition programs, homeless populations, and getting them in with the resources that will help them recover from disasters as well. It's about ensuring that you have the network of partners, referrals, and access to meet clients where they're at and not try and make clients meet you where you're at.
What a great way to kind of end, to meet people where they're at rather than where you're at. That, I think, is just a really, that's an important message that a lot of people sometimes forget, that if we want to have true impact, we should meet where somebody already is at. Did you have any last words before we kind of do a little bit of housekeeping and let everybody take a little bit of a break before afternoon sessions?
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. I've really enjoyed the dialogue and conversation. As we sit in the middle of a large scale response, and the relevance of this conversation hits home for me. It is about that family. It is about that individual. It is about the community and as they recover. And every element of data that we use, every analysis that we put forward, every geospatial tool, every analytic product, every partnership that we gain to share data can have an impact that is positive on someone's recovery and a community's recovery. And keeping that in mind as we work today, and as you look through the lens of opportunities to support and partner and engage, it's there's so much impact that can be done through data. And I just look forward to the opportunity to partnering with you more.
Yes, we are so grateful that you took the time out to give a really excellent talk and to have this conversation with us. And we hope it's the start of deeper engagement uh, with you and with your data team and with the American Red Cross overall. So thank you
Thank you.
so much for sharing your insight. And I personally appreciate you sharing your challenges, because the only way we improve those challenges is if we share them. So, and that's
Absolutely.
one of the things I love about ESIP, is that I always feel comfortable sharing my challenges here, because I know that there's going to be somebody here who's going to help me solve them. So, and I hope you find the same. Everybody, please, thank Casey again. This was a really brilliant conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Um, Before I let you all sign off, I wanted to remind you about a few things. We have a break coming up. There's no official networking in this next little break. But we have a research showcase on Wednesday evening. This is one of my favorite parts of the meeting, is this research showcase. So please make the time to come tomorrow afternoon, starting at 4 p.m. Eastern. Also, we have great networking opportunities. We do have some breaks built into the day. Some of them have official networking events. This afternoon is our first Birds of a Feather breakout coffee break. We encourage you to submit ideas for breakout rooms. There will, we already have, we'll have a stretch break with Allison. There will be a pet parade, which I think my cat Bridget is already getting excited. And you can suggest other topics in the link that Allison has provided in chat. Please provide those suggestions before the afternoon breakout sessions begin up again at 1 p.m. Eastern. And we'll be doing these breakouts today and Thursday. You can suggest more topics for the Thursday one as the week goes on. Yes, this is Bridget. She will probably join the pet parade. Hopefully, you got as much out of that talk as I did, and I look forward to seeing you all this afternoon, or late morning, depending on where you are. In about 48 minutes, we'll start back up. Thank you all.